Picture this, an aging aircraft, mid-takeoff. Suddenly, an engine just falls off. It sparks this fatal catastrophe, and boom, a whole critical part of American commerce is grounded, instantly. And that's not some movie plot. That's the shocking reality that basically paralyzed the U.S. logistics system just this month. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, our mission is really to unpack what happened with UPS Flight 2976 in Louisville, Kentucky. We need to look at the catastrophic failure and then analyze the fallout, this immediate, economically devastating grounding of all the MD-11 freighters, UPS and FedEx. We're really looking at this dangerous intersection, Aging infrastructure meeting head-on with our absolute reliance on the supply chain. The details from November 4th, 2025, and they're just brutal. The crash killed at least 14 people. That includes all 3 crew members. And there's a dramatic video, you probably saw it, amateur footage showing the plane, its left wing totally engulfed in fire. The engine is gone right after takeoff. This failure wasn't even a question. It immediately triggered an FAA Emergency Airworthiness Directive, grounded the whole fleet. And the timing. I mean, just as carriers are heading into the absolute peak shipping season.
Yeah, the timing couldn't be worse.
Think about the ripple effect here. We're talking about a massive, immediate loss of capacity. These planes, they support global supply chains. This grounding just wipes out roughly 9% of UPS's air fleet and 4% of FedEx's.
That's right. Huge numbers.
So it's not just a safety issue, is it? It's a critical logistical shockwave hitting everyone, consumers, businesses, right before the holidays.
Absolutely. And, the fact that they had to take this step, grounding everything immediately, it really speaks volumes about the threat they perceived. Shutting down such a vital tool for commerce, especially right when it's needed most, that just underscores how serious this safety breach in Louisville must be. So the big question we have to tackle is accountability. Why did this specific plane, this MD-11 workhorse, fail so catastrophically during just a normal takeoff? And maybe more importantly, what does its known safety history, going back decades, tell us about the structural risks baked into American air cargo today?
Yeah.
We're really looking at a situation where safety concerns just had to override everything else. Commercial convenience, profits, none of that mattered in that moment.
Okay, let's dig into the actual moments leading up to the crash.
Yeah.
Zoom in on how it failed. So UPS 2976, the 34-year-old MD-11, was heading to Honolulu. Initial data suggests it hit about 186 knots ground speed, got up to maybe 175 feet.
That's barely off the ground.
Right. Then lost control, banked left, and crashed into businesses near the runway.
And the CVR, the Cockpit Voice Recorder, it gives us this really chilling timeline. It suggests the crew had almost no time to figure out what was happening, let alone react. About 37 seconds after they pushed the throttles for takeoff, this repeating bell alarm starts sounding in the cockpit.
Alarm, okay.
Yeah, and it just kept going for 25 seconds right until the recording stopped.
Wow. So less than a minute from the start of the takeoff roll to impact, essentially, with the alarm blaring for half of it?
Yeah.
What was that alarm likely signaling?
Investigators are pretty strongly suggesting it was the engine fire warning. A fire bad enough, catastrophic enough to weaken the engine mounting structure itself. By the time that bell started ringing, the plane was already committed, past V1, no runway left to stop.
They were airborne?
Airborne, fast, and a critical part of their plane was basically disintegrating instantly.
Okay, so this is where it gets complicated,
Yeah.
right? We shift from just the mechanics of the accident to the human side, the maintenance trail. This plane wasn't just old, it had just come out of some serious work.
Very serious work. It had basically been taken apart and put back together. The aircraft was grounded for 6 weeks, right up until mid-October, down in San Antonio for heavy maintenance.
And this wasn't just routine stuff.
No, not an oil change. They repaired a crack in a fuel tank, and significantly, they found and repaired corrosion on 2 major structural beams in the fuselage.
Okay.
So the NTSB is now laser focused on that. Could something done or maybe missed during that heavy maintenance have contributed to this failure?
Let's be really clear about the failure point itself. The number 1 engine, the left one, it came off. But the key detail seems to be the pylon.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The pylon, that's the big piece connecting the engine to the wing.
Yeah.
It was found still attached to the engine, not the wing.
Right. So what does that imply?
Well, the pylon is the load-bearing structure. If the engine itself blew up, you might expect the pylon to stay on the wing. But if the pylon comes off with the engine, it means the failure point was likely where the pylon attaches to the wing itself, or maybe deep within the wing structure supporting that pylon. It really points towards a major structural failure. either at that connection point or maybe some deep fatigue that got worse or was perhaps missed during that recent check.
And when you see the FAA's reaction, grounding every MD-11, not just UPS's, but FedEx's too,
Yeah.
you have to wonder, was this just about one potentially bad maintenance job? Or did they see something suggesting this is a problem with all these old MD-11s?
They clearly feared it was systemic. The language they used in the emergency AD, the directive,
What did it say?
it said the unsafe condition is likely to exist or develop in other products of the same type design.
Okay, that's significant.
It is. They're not just worried about one mistake in one hangar. They're worried they've found a fundamental structural weakness across the entire aging fleet.
Which brings us to the history of this aircraft, doesn't it? The fact that the whole fleet is now under scrutiny. It shows investigators are looking way beyond just this one incident, this one maintenance log. They're looking at decades of stress on these airframes. And maybe the irony here is that the problem that showed up during takeoff, it might actually be linked to the plane's really notorious struggles during landing.
That's a critical link people are making. This aircraft type, the MD-11, its hull loss rate is, well, the official term is notably higher than similar wide-body freighters. And get this, it has the highest rate of hard landing events, 5.63 per million flight cycles. That's compared across 27 major Western transport planes.
The highest rate. Wow.
Yeah, this plane is known for being uniquely difficult to land smoothly. Pilots often say it wants to slam onto the runway.
And the NTSB, they've looked into this before, right? Identified specific design issues.
Oh, yes. They pinpointed 4 key factors in the design that make it so challenging that increase the accident risk.
Let's walk through those. First up was stability. Why is it less stable?
It goes back to the design phase, decades ago. They shortened the horizontal stabilizer, the little wing on the tail, compared to its predecessor, the DC-10,
Why do that?
to save weight, save fuel, an efficiency trade-off. But the direct result was less longitudinal stability.
Okay, and what does less longitudinal stability mean for the pilot flying it, in practical terms?
Think of trying to balance a really long pole on your hand. It's just twitchy. It wants to pitch up or down very easily with little input.
No.
This inherent instability is a big reason why it has this history of difficult landings, sometimes even leading to those flip-over incidents or runway excursions.
And that instability is made worse by the speeds involved.
Exactly. Factor 2, speed and timing. The MD-11 lands fast. Approach speeds can be up to 186 knots. That's really moving. And it forces the pilot into this incredibly narrow window to actually execute the landing flare.
You mentioned, I think it was in our research, pilots have only about 1.4 seconds from the 50-foot cal out to starting the flare.
Just 1.4 seconds. It sounds like nothing, and it almost is.
That's insane.
It really is. To put that in perspective, that's barely enough time for the pilot to hear 50 feet, process it, and physically move the controls to start raising the nose before the wheels hit.
Wow.
Most other big jets give pilots several more crucial seconds. With the MD-11, if you're slightly off, slightly late at those speeds, you hit hard. And that landing gear takes a beating, cycle after cycle.
And the plane's physical layout, the geometry, actually makes it harder for the pilot in those critical seconds. It sort of lies to them.
That's a good way to put it. That's the third factor,
Yeah.
geometry. The cockpit is way out front, extended 100 inches ahead of the plane's center of gravity.
Like driving a bus from the very front seat.
Precisely. So if the plane bounces on landing, which happens easily with hard landings, the cockpit and the main landing gear actually move in opposite directions relative to the center of gravity.
Ah, I see.
It gives the pilot what the NTSB called misleading motion cues. The pilot feels a certain movement and reacts, but because of where they're sitting, their instinctive correction might actually make the bounce worse, leading to an even harder second impact.
Okay, instability, high speed, tricky geometry. Which brings us to the fourth factor, the structure itself, how it handles those hard landings.
Right. Given this history, all this stress, what did the NTSB find about the landing gear and wing structure?
What was the vulnerability?
The structure itself was found to be vulnerable. The NTSB noted that a really bad bounce, one the pilot couldn't recover from quickly, could transfer a massive vertical overload through the landing gear, and that overload could actually fracture the main wing spar. That's the main internal backbone of the wing.
Fracture the wing spar. That sounds catastrophic.
It is. It could cause the entire plane to just roll over on the runway. And here's the crucial part. When the MD-11 was certified, way back when, the landing gear wasn't required to have a sort of fuse. It wasn't designed to break away cleanly under extreme vertical load.
So instead of breaking off,
It transmitted that massive force directly into the wing structure, the spar.
So these warnings about the stability, the speed, the geometry, the structural weakness, these aren't new concerns. The NTSB pointed these out years ago.
That's right. These specific issues were highlighted in formal safety recommendations sent to the FAA way back in 2014.
And did anything change? Did they act on those warnings before this latest disaster?
Well, it definitely led to changes in pilot training, more emphasis on handling the MD-11's quirks. The NTSB urged stronger rules about how recently pilots had to have flown the type, pilot currency. And they also pushed for installing modern flare queuing systems in the cockpit, tools to help pilots nail that tricky landing window.
But the fundamental design issues remained.
The fundamental design didn't change, no. And what the Louisville crash might be telling us now is that the cumulative effect of decades of these stress events, all those hard landings sending jolts through the gear into the wing, maybe that weakened the very structures, like those pylon attachments that ultimately failed, not during landing, but catastrophically on takeoff.
So the failure on November 4th could be the final tragic consequence of a plane constantly fighting its own design limitations for 30-plus years.
It's a very real possibility investigators are considering.
Okay, so we've got this fatal crash. It seems linked to potential maintenance issues on a really old airframe, but it's layered on top of these systemic design flaws that have been stressing this entire aircraft type for decades. The response, the safety-first response, was immediate.
Yeah.
Ground every single one.
Let's talk about the impact of that decision, the cold, hard logistical cost.
The scale is just immense. We're talking 55 huge, wide-body freighters suddenly sitting idle on the ramp. UPS grounded 27 planes, that's 9% of their whole air fleet. FedEx grounded 28 MD-11s, which is about 4% of theirs.
But just saying 9% or 4%, it doesn't really capture the capability they lost, does it? Why are these MD-11s so much more important than, say, a Boeing 767 freighter? It really comes down to three things: capacity, volume, and range. The MD-11F is a dedicated heavy lifter built for long distances. It carries significantly more payload, more sheer stuff, and has much more internal cubic volume than common alternatives like the 767-300F.
So you can't just swap one for one.
Not at all. If you lose one MD-11 flight, you might need 2, maybe even 3 767 flights to move the same amount of cargo, especially the bulky stuff. Losing this specific capacity cripples those critical long-haul routes. Think about that Louisville to Honolulu flight that's a long way over water.
Right.
Suddenly, routes like that need intermediate refueling stops, adding hours, adding fuel costs, or carriers just have to divert huge amounts of freight onto other planes that were probably already full.
And this hits just as the holiday peak season kicks into high gear. The busiest time of the year, Thanksgiving to Christmas. How are UPS and FedEx even coping? How do you pivot that fast?
It's got to be a frantic scramble. UPS put out statements saying they have contingency plans, complex ones, already in motion. They're shifting the highest priority stuff onto their remaining big planes, like the 747s and 767s, but obviously that creates gaps elsewhere.
So they're using other companies.
Yeah, they're leaning much more heavily on contract carriers, chartering planes from outfits like Atlas Air, which is, incredibly expensive, especially last minute.
Makes sense.
And maybe the biggest shift, and one people might notice, is they're pushing a lot of freight that used to fly, even for just part of its journey, onto their ground networks, trucks and trains.
Moving air freight by truck. That sounds like a major step backward in terms of speed and service promises.
It absolutely is. But they likely have no choice right now. The volume has to move somehow. And maybe the fundamental lesson here for you listening, for the whole economy really, is seeing the value of regulatory seriousness, of rigor. The timing here, shutting down this vital transport artery right before peak season, it demonstrates just how severe the FAA and the carriers judge this safety risk to be.
Yeah, it shows that the risk must have clearly outweighed the massive, immediate financial hit and the guaranteed disruption to consumers and businesses.
Exactly. That decision really validates how serious the failure in Louisville was perceived. It shows that when the evidence points to a potential catastrophic failure being likely to exist or develop, well, you just can't gamble. You can't compromise safety. Not for quarterly earnings, not even for Christmas presents.
It's that moment where the integrity of the system, public safety, has to come first.
Absolutely. Takes precedence over even the biggest, most immediate commercial pressures.
Okay, so let's try to sum up this deep dive. We've looked at a tragic takeoff crash. It seems likely linked to the structural integrity of this specific MD-11, maybe tied to recent heavy maintenance, but it happened against the backdrop of an aircraft type that's been plagued by known systemic design flaws that have put stress on these airframes, especially during landings, for literally decades.
And that grounding, it really represents a huge crossroads for American air cargo, doesn't it? I mean, these MD-11s are already ancient in aviation terms. Many are over 30 years old, yet companies like FedEx were planning to keep flying them well into the 2030s.
Hmm.
Now, the entire U.S. supply chain has to face this reality head on, both the financial side and the safety side. Will the immediate inspections, maybe some temporary fixes, be enough to get this fleet back in the air quickly, save the peak season? Or has Louisville forced everyone's hand? Is this the start of an accelerated, definitely costly, but maybe ultimately necessary retirement of an entire really critical class of freighter aircraft?
That really is the crucial question, isn't it? Safety versus cost, short-term needs versus long-term risks. It's something the aviation industry, and by extension, all of us as consumers are going to be grappling with for months, maybe even years. We really appreciate you taking this deep dive with us today.